So, as you can see, Schumann immediately takes the bull by the horns, and in the first variations, as I said, puts life into the work by tapping into all the rich voices and textures the piano offers, using all the registers and driving them in part, using the polyphonic methods, which we showed he already mastered brilliantly. He imbues his works with a wide range of incredible technical difficulties, but does so only for the purpose of giving life to the flight's engine. As I've said before, and repeat once again, the transcendental difficulties of the studies of Liszt and Chopin are remarkable and fantastic. I would generally call these works fantastic etudes, and this would be most closely corresponded to what Schumann did. So, the transcendental technique which these three giants have developed, each in their own way, depends on their intent, or each composer, and the possibilities of their physiology, ingenuity, and their generally amazing talents. As such, they transform these difficulties into engines, so that we, modern people, could interpret this artistic task based on these linguistic engines, and we view them through the lens of flying machines piloted by pianists. And here is the main mistake. Well, I don't know whether it's mistake or limitation, the limitations of interpreters, that in such works, well, there are not so many of them, we see only the motor, but we do not see what it must elevate into flight. So, in the first variation, we let death take a back seat. Time, having been allowed back in spite of death, has turned death upside down through the motor's activity. In the second variations, Schumann demonstrates again his mastery of using three simultaneous but different planes of thought or texture at once. But the result gives us a delightful romance where I will now touch upon the mistakes of interpreters. Error number 1: oversaturation of sound due to the rich texture of the fabric. What do we have here in common, all three flaws? Let's examine this amazing, pathetic romance, romance pathétique. The romance is very exalted and the most very remarkable romantic traditions of the 19th century, sentimental, romantic, symbolic traditions. We will now see that in this romance, in addition to all the knightly ideas and the chivalrous song, Schumann gives gratitude to and converses with Beethoven's spirit. And we clearly hear now it's in music. So, in the upper voice, on the top floor, we hear a theme, which again Schumann constantly turns over, mulling over the theme of death. He no longer desires a thematic romantic incarnation, nor does he want death, and perform this inversion routinely. The same in our romance, which will share the top layer. And this attracts our attention at the main song, staying contradictory to death, and is using the theme in inversion. With a breezy romantic pulse. So characteristic of Schumann's way of thinking, which we must always exhibit, this air pockets, air bags. A wonderful, touching, simple romance precedes the middle floors in the basses. Then lives through the major, with a heroic ending which transports us in the major. Then we hear the middle part, but we'll get to that later. So let's take the first half. In the middle voice we have this material. An accompaniment, which is the biggest obstacle for interpreters. Schumann at times, believing that he deals with people who are conscious, who read the text well, calls for that middle voice to be constantly pianissima. That's regardless of how loud and active everything is moving in upper and lower floors. He wants a pulsation to be almost unaudible. It's amazingly beautiful. This pulsation reminds us of the most fantastic examples of Beethoven's on one side, and on the other hand, all sorts of our most beloved popular folk songs, which turned into pop music, rock music in our days. Therein lies amazing, beautiful harmony that are forever pleasant for us, regardless of chosen instrument, whether it's electric or acoustic guitar, synthesizers or live orchestra. But this pulsation must caress our ears and our body, materially and spiritually, and our soul. And in a low voice, Schumann is inevitably... It invariably presents his remarkable heroic theme, which lives through the death of the hero. In Chopin's, Schumann's Liszt, the entire intelligentsia from the beginning of 19th century to the present Russian Soviet folk heroes, as I said already. Here are three floors. On the first floor is a romance, a piercing romance. On the ground floor is a reminder of hero. And in between, in the middle floor, life is pulsing. And always be mindful of the title Symphonic Etudes. Always. In my literary preamble, prefacing our lecture about music, I say Schumann's consciousness ranged among different names, symphonic, pathetic, variations, etudes, and so on, because he wanted to define too many goals. And these goals, unfortunately, have not yet been realized. And I wish that once and for all, we all already knew what the author wanted. Symphonic, because such a pulsation in the orchestra cannot be played unevenly. Because many people play pulsation, be it wind instruments, be it strings, be it pulsation on any instruments played in orchestra. It is impossible to play uneven. This pulsation and so on and so on. So this pulsation is life. It's symbolizing life. In addition to the fact that interpreters play it loudly, they still play unevenly, giving into their emotions, not understanding aesthetically, philosophically, or informally what the music is all about. Therefore, everything is broken: harmony, aesthetics, taste. All meanings are broken. Everything becomes vulgar, rude, and it's just a mockery of the author, without understanding all the classics and beauty that are embedded in this music. It is precisely in the even pace of pulsation, which is in symphonic performance, and this is Symphonic Etude, don't forget. Schumann now gives a hint to interpreters, whom he foresees will make these mistakes. Thus he writes, expressively, And expressiveness is related to the main materials, but in no case to breathing. And here, between all these floors, of layers, we completely separate life exists. Life exists separately. There must be complete separation, something that I have already indicated. This division is both characteristic, philosophical, and involves content separation, mental separation, technical separation. That is, as I said, and I repeat it one and more, it is a problem of vestibular apparatus, it's a problem of thinking, it's a mastery. All our physiology, physics, all of which goes against what is advocated by Schumann. He does not want the music limited by man's physical material. He sets task exclusively in the artistic realm, despising and overcoming the material barriers. And if we understand all this, its complicity, then we get refined, beautiful, multi-story building. Where the hero lives in the bass, in discants. An amazing song which Ophelia could sing. And in the middle voice is a breeze of life. The heroic appearance of the hero rising from the ashes. So here is our first half. Now, why did I talk about Beethoven? The transition to the second half gives us his sound and a rhythm of the dynamic ornament. I think you will immediately know why. Schumann says it's hello to Beethoven. So, we remember, Schumann, Chopin, Liszt are the children of Beethoven. They found him 12 years old. Liszt was kissed on the forehead by Beethoven at one of his early concerts. Beethoven is the spiritual father and particularly material father. Practically, Beethoven the superstar to whom they pay homage and eternal deference. Now we remember the name, Etude Pathétique. Hello, Ludwig. Even the tonality coincides with Beethoven. Hello, Ludwig, says Robin. And the moonlit landscape here appears. The lunar or oceanic, something nightly connected with nature, with night conditions, with the symbolism of the night and the sublime, poetic atmosphere of the Pathétique. And we are now halfway through the time of the funeral of the hero, because at the time everything is developing the same theme. At all times it develops in the same framework, using the same standards that the author of the topic demanded. Well, the author, we can assume that this is not amateurs and Baron von Fricken, a folk theme entirely which already hung in the minds of European peoples of the early 19th century. So, it is so characteristic already for people's mind. So if we have analyzed, it's already characteristic for romantic consciousness, three-part form, the death of the hero, memories of the living hero, a terrible reality of the funeral of the hero, an epitaph, epilogue. So Schumann here as a funeral bell. It's very beautiful. While the upper part of the Romance, we can already imagine it's as an image of the night. Either it's a running clouds or the night sky or the exciting ocean under the night sky. That is, considering this nocturnal, pathetic Beethoven's lunar state, we of course can identify these images that flashed before his eyes when he was writing this music. The hero theme, the funeral bell, night images of nature. And all this together turns into an amazing picture of already symbolic poetry. Here we can recall the crow of Edgar Allan Poe and all the poetry of Maeterlinck and symbolism with overlapping symbols which completely draw our poetic consciousness from a sinful land to another reality. A remarkable roll call between the souls of the hero and obviously the beloved hero. This can also be treated quite calmly. Voices in the night, in the funeral bell, in this amazing color of symbolism, dark but at the same time very tempting, which is still very much loved by the romantic strings of our soul. Especially when we are connected by loneliness, thoughtfulness, it is an absolutely necessary condition for the soul of a person to purify it. Again, on all these three floors, these waves rising, this wave rises again, there is a scream against death. The theme of death in an inversion. Again, living in the major, as you remember, is the life of the hero. And it returns to the mortal reality, but turning death backwards. Here is a pathetic, Beethoven-esque, moon-pathetic romantic orations, evocative of the name Edgar Allan Poe or Maeterlinck or all European and Russian symbolism. And we get it not in 18th or 19th century or 19th century, but in 1834. 1834, before all symbolism broke up fully in world culture. Well, now I will play this whole delightful lunar pathetic variation with its reversal of death.